Dun 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 dun. Hello, huge movie fanatic Nate, stopping on by. This time I'm coming at you to do another one of my famed movies / Blu-ray reviews. This time I'm coming at you to review the TV movie and Blu-ray of The Night Stalker. Now this is just recently, from what I understand, along with its sequel, The Night Strangler, has been recently released on Blu-ray courtesy of Kino Lorber in a fantastic, and I'll be reviewing both titles, and this obviously video is for this title, in a fantastic new Blu-ray presentation of this absolutely classic, made for TV in 1972 movie, kind of vampire hunter movie by the name of The Night Stalker. So first I'll talk about the movie, and then I'll talk briefly about the recently released Blu-ray. Now my mom has always been a big fan of this movie. I never asked her. I mean, I don't know if she saw it in '72. I don't know when she originally saw it, but I remember as a kid, I think we taped it off TV, at some point in the 80s, late 80s or something like that, it was on and we taped it. And that was the first time I ever saw this. So I saw this movie for the first time as a kid, and then I probably watched it a little bit back then, but then at some point, I don't know if it was 2004, or at some point MGM put out a double feature DVD release with The Night Stalker and The Night Strangler, and then at that time I got that. I don't think I ever watched The Strangler, though. I've never seen The Night Strangler from what I'm not sure, but so that was a really cool set that they put out, and now of course Kino Lorber put out this fantastic, both of them on a fantastic new Blu-ray releases. So this movie was basically made and conceived and executed with the purpose to be shown on television. It was a TV movie, and I got to tell you, from back in the 70s and stuff, I think the 70s was the first decade they actually started doing TV movies, and I gotta tell you, I really like a lot of these TV movies. And the Killdozer is another one that I saw, and obviously Duel, which is a movie by Steven Spielberg, which they ended up liking so much, of course. I already reviewed that on this channel years ago. They ended up liking that, of course, enough to go and shoot more footage to make it feature length to put it in the theater. And I actually saw Duel in the theater in kind of a recently in a frickin' showing of art house showing of Duel to see in the theater. That was just a treat. But anyway, I'm segueing. So I'm here to review this absolutely fantastic made-for-TV movie that came out in 1972, starring Darren McGavin. And before I even start the review, I want to say that this guy, pretty much all I know him from is pretty much this and Christmas Story. I don't think in like Raw Deal, the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie and stuff. But I got to tell you, for me, Darren McGavin is one of these actors who is a complete, a breed of actor that is completely just come and gone. And for me, I mean, maybe with the exception of some people, very few people these days, is really kind of a breed of actor that is that doesn't really exist anymore. This guy is so perfect. He's a great actor in everything I see him in, but he's so perfect for this role. I mean, this being 72, the very early 70s, the fashion is still very much kind of the little bit of the late 60s and stuff, and I love the hat, the outfit that Darren McGavin's character, Kolchak, who's a newspaper reporter, wears in this movie. And the hat, the 60s hat, kind of just completes the whole outfit. It's absolutely fantastic. So this movie basically takes place in Las Vegas, which is kind of a interesting place to to set this movie. And it basically starts with this woman at night who's getting off work or whatever. She's a waitress or something, and she ends up being attacked by some mysterious character. And the whole story of this movie. Oh, before I even start that. The very beginning of this movie is really cool, where it kind of zooms in on an old Sony tape recorder, and Darren McGavin puts in a tape, and he presses play, and it's his voice, and it's kind of the beginning of, I guess he's written this book or something like that about his account of this whole movie that you're going to see. So we kind of see him, after the whole movie has happened, down and out, kind of finishing up his book, or listening to him reading it back to make sure it's the way he wants it or whatever. So that's the very beginning of the movie, and then there's narration throughout the movie. I think the narration is more heavily towards the beginning than I think the middle and the end, but there's the narration is done by Darren McGavin in kind of a detective story fashion, as if, because he's like reading from his book or whatever, he's written about this event. So basically at the beginning of it, like I say, it's this waitress or whatever getting off work at like 2 in the morning in Las Vegas and gets attacked by this, this whatever, this mysterious killer or whatever. So what ends up happening is we end up discovering that Darren McGavin is a newspaper reporter working for this one guy who I think this guy, I want to say I've seen him in something else before, the guy who like plays the head honcho at the newspaper. He might have been in the Steve McQueen movie Bullet, in the late 60s. I'm pretty sure he was in that. Yeah, I think he was in that. But this guy is kind of a great actor from the 60s and 70s and stuff. The guy is kind of Kolchak's boss. But Darren McGavin's Kolchak, this, just frickin' newspaper reporter that's just, I don't know, worked all over the country and gotten fired all over the country and keeps moving around from city to city because he always gets fired or whatever his backstory is. So this movie basically just surrounds, is just basically about that. In the very beginning of the movie, when they're doing the autopsy on this particular individual, they're like, oh my God, the blood's all gone out of this girl. And then, throughout the course of the beginning of the movie, they end up finding like another body with the blood drained and like no footprints around the body, and it's just like, how the hell did the corpse get there? Did the killer throw her over there? And it's just so but the movie is got the perfect combination of like seeing stuff happen very abbreviated, kind of like the beginning of the movie, the scene with the waitress, and then the next couple victims, I think we just see the bodies show up, and then like the third or fourth victim or something like that, we see that it's a really cool progression, or a cool combination of seeing stuff happen very abbreviatedly and then like just seeing victims after the fact and getting details that way. And then at some point, maybe it's like the third or fourth victim to be, we see the killer in these really creepy close-up of his like white face and bloodshot eyes, just like, and sitting in his car waiting for a moment to strike as she's approaching her car at night. He only strikes at night. And he goes up to her and she's like, oh my God, looks all shocked, and we as the viewer think it's going to be another victim. Well, she opens the back door to her car or station wagon or whatever, and this big frickin', I don't know, dangerous dog comes out like, rah, and attacks the guy, and we just, I don't think we really see his face at this point, and the guy just basically takes the dog and just, whatever, kills it in his bare hands and drops it to the ground. And then I don't remember what exactly, I think we're just kind of maybe it just cuts and we imply that the woman is captured at that point. But what's really cool about the movie as it progresses is because of the details we got at the very beginning of all these victims being drained of blood, and then this fact that, as a viewer we see this dog having no effect. Darren McGavin, as he's going to press conferences and stuff with the city quote-unquote officials, is learning that, this guy is exhibiting basically signs of being, obviously the idea of him being a vampire is ludicrous, but regardless of whether it's ludicrous or not, I mean, his victims and what's going on with this guy exhibiting, superhuman strength, and as the movie progresses, he's, breaking into blood banks, and he even gets caught, at one point by the police, and they're shooting at him, and they empty all kinds of rounds into him, and he just, outruns a freaking police car chase, or eludes them even if he's on foot or whatever. So as the movie progresses, Darren McGavin is like the only one who's like who's thinking to himself, well, fellas, this guy is exhibiting all these characteristics of what a vampire would do if they were real. Why don't we just you guys can't capture this guy? Why don't we treat this as if it's a vampire? And he pulls out, like, towards the end, probably halfway point or towards the beginning of the last third of the movie or whatever, he goes to the officials and he's like, tell you what, this guy's acting like a vampire. Why don't we try capturing him or killing him like he's a vampire? And he has this bag and he takes out a crucifix and a wooden stake and a mallet. And the city officials, of course, are like, what the hell, this is ridiculous or whatever. And Kolchak kind of talks them into going along with him, like, of course, if my gimmick of capturing him like this works, or killing him or whatever, then I get the exclusive story rights. And I don't think that they don't really want him killed, because they kind of say that they call that, that's premeditated murder, even though this guy's killing innocent women and stuff and kidnapping them or whatever. The city officials still don't like the idea of elusive killer guy being killed in cold blood or whatever. So they kind of, I don't know why they kind of go along with it. I guess they assume that Kolchak's nuts, and so it doesn't really matter or whatever. But the very end of the movie, is really creepy, because you don't expect that it's going to necessarily be the end of the movie. You think he's just going to, Kolchak's really smart, and I think through some tip, or, from some tips, he's got people all around town that he gets tips from. I think he somehow found out where the killer lives, and at this point, I think he's kind of convinced that this guy is a vampire. So he goes basically to the house that he thinks he lives at the end of the movie, and right before dawn, and assuming to, be there or something. I think when the guy comes back to obviously go to bed before the sun comes up, and it's a really creepy scene. It's really dark in the house and stuff, and you don't know if the vampire is in there or if he's not. And he goes in, he's creeping around in the house, and sees, of course, jars of blood in the fridge, and goes up to a room upstairs and see this woman tied down to it, and she's all pale and got the thing. That's another thing about the movie. As the movie progresses, the details about the holes in the neck, as if it's from a dog or something like that. What's really cool about this movie, it's a completely real world 1972 feel. So obviously, even though there's got holes in the neck from this woman and her blood's all gone, obviously they're not going to just jump to, oh, it's a vampire, So the guys, the medical examiner or whatever, will be talking like, well, it's teeth marks on her neck like a large dog or whatever. So obviously, to the viewer, that, if they know they're watching a vampire movie, obviously that detail is like, obvious. But, to someone, you got to just imagine yourself, if this was your job and you're seeing, bite neck, or bite marks on the neck when the blood's drained. I mean, you're not going to just, assuming that vampires are a fictional thing, you're not just going to go, oh, it must be a vampire. So I don't know I don't know where the hell I was going, but the woman being basically tied up on the bed, and she's just slowly being drained of blood or whatever, and I found myself, I haven't seen it probably since the DVD double feature came out, but I found myself at the end of the movie, even now watching it, being that kind of creeped out at the end of the movie when Kolchak sneaks into his house in the dark and stuff like that, and you just kind of like got your nerves going a little bit of like, oh my God, when's he gonna, and especially when he finds the girl, you're like, the stakes get a little higher, and you're kind of like, man, when's the vampire gonna come home? And because I hadn't seen it for so long, I pretty much forgot the whole thing, and I gotta tell you, I was having a hoot watching it, the movie, and in particular the end scene and stuff. And if I can spoil it, I mean, it's an old enough movie where I can spoil it. Vampire comes back, and sure enough, when the silver cross is used, and it's like, and the guy who plays a vampire, by the way, is absolutely just fantastic, phenomenal. He never says one word, which is really, really cool. And there's this other guy, is his name on this thing? Yeah, Ralph Meeker, who would end up being in a Bill Rebane movie in the late 70s by the name of The Alpha Incident. Ralph Meeker was the second billing in Stanley Kubrick's Paths of Glory after Kirk Douglas. Ralph Meeker was the second billing in that movie, and I was really surprised to find that out after I found out that he was in a Bill Rebane movie in the late 70s. This Ralph Meeker is actually a really, really great actor. I just kind of like, his voice and his on-screen persona, I think he's absolutely fantastic in Alpha Incident, which you can probably see on YouTube, I don't know, but Ralph Meeker is I forget what he is. He's like a city official or a cop or something like that. So once Kolchak is kind of fighting with the vampire at the end of the movie in his house, Ralph Meeker's character ends up showing up and kind of helping him, and the vampire is kind of fighting both of them, and Ralph Meeker ends up kind of helping Darren McGavin, on the steps, the crosses kind of, take away what's a little bit of his power and make the guy kind of cower down onto the steps. And at that point, Kolchak takes out the whatchamacallit, what's it called, the wooden spike, and proceeds to put it in position on his chest. And this guy doing the vampire acting is just so awesome. He's like, looking just so hopeless, and you kind of feel bad for him. And then you're kind of, as an audience, you're waiting for the inevitable, and when he starts pounding the thing, this is pretty violent for even now, let alone 1972, primetime television. I mean, you don't see anything, but just the act of, pounding this thing into his, his heart, and having him go, as he's pounding it in, it's kind of brutal, and it's just really oh my God, it's a pretty fitting climactic ending to this movie. And so basically Ralph Meeker's character kind of comes to the rescue of Kolchak character, and the both of them kind of are able to to defeat the vampire in this movie. And what ends up, I was really surprised, having rewatched it recently, how this movie ends. It's really disappointing and actually realistic. Is what ends up happening is that he goes back to the authorities, and they're not even grateful. You'd think they'd be grateful for him, solving the city's problem. Well, what I didn't mention is Kolchak's also got this pretty, sexy-ass blonde played by Carol Lindley. Throughout the movie, you see, them interact a little bit. So after he kills the vampire, there's one last scene with those two, and I think at that point he proposes to her. He just feels like he's on top of the world because, he solved this crime and he killed this vampire. He killed this killer of innocent women, and he proposes to the beautiful, hot, frickin' blonde girl, and I think she says yes, and he just skips down to the police station, in which I think he expects to be kind of opened with welcome arms and congratulated. What they end up doing is basically saying, you committed murder. This is murder. So tell you what, we're either going to charge you with murder, or you just, or get the hell out of town and never come back, or whatever the hell they say. And he's like, well, I gotta go get, my girlfriend at the hotel or whatever. And they say, and it's really kind of painful to hear this. They say, we sent her on her way. She's already gone. And it's just like in a before internet era, the movie ends on such a melancholy note. And as I said, probably realistic, of like her being sent away and Kolchak being sent away. And it's like frickin' pre-internet, it's not like they got Facebook, how the fuck, and it's really kind of, oh, I swore, oh well, how the heck are, it's really kind of a melancholy ending, like, gosh, how's he ever going to come in contact with her again? And basically the thanks he gets from the city quote-unquote officials is his life, kind of, a little bit, in regards to his marital status anyway, or his, whatever, his relationship status really screwed that up, and again uprooted him and basically chased him out of Vegas. So I mean, although the ending is really kind of a bummer, I think it's a really, really great ending. And as I said many times already, in a way it's realistic. How the city official assholes just basically, are now completely gone of their problem, but instead of congratulating and thanking the guy that ended the problem for them when they didn't even really do anything, they just basically kicked this guy out of the city, which is just really, really, really nasty. So the end of the movie is cutting back to what we saw at the beginning of the movie, of him kind of laying in bed, and at the beginning of the movie he was presumably starting the novel, or to read it, or listening to the tapes of him reading it, and at the end of the story, we return to him laying in bed. This is after he's been kicked out of Vegas and finishing the book or whatever, and absolutely fantastic. And this is a really short movie. It's 74 minutes long, and I got to tell you, it really kind of makes me miss these days of the 60s and the 70s and stuff, when especially these, the 70s era of movies made for TV, when you can tell such a compelling and interesting story in 74 minutes. What can I tell you? 3.5 stars out of 4 stars for the Night Stalker. I think it's an absolutely fantastically written and an executed movie. I think the cast is fantastic. Darren McGavin, obviously, the guy who plays Vampire, and a little bit of eye candy with Carol Lindley or whatever. Absolutely, like so many movies now are so long, and 2.5 hours, whatever, so long, and they don't have an ounce of the subject matter, or the whatever you want to call it. Just they don't have an ounce of the meat or whatever that this movie has in 74 minutes. It's really a shame what's happened to quote unquote entertainment over the years and the decades, but I'd highly recommend obviously this movie, and getting onto the Blu-ray release. Absolutely fantastic. Now basically what it shows on the back of the box here, as I'll show you, is this release features a brand new HD restoration in 4K, a 4K restoration of a TV movie from 1974. How cool is that? I wish they'd do that with the Killdozer. And this Blu-ray features, I gotta say that the image quality is just like, oh my gosh, obviously you never expected to see the Night Stalker in this kind of image quality. It's absolutely stupendous image quality. It's the absolute hoot to be able to experience this movie in this kind of quality. The colors are just so vivid. The contrast is really on par. I mean, it's just obviously the best way you've ever, been able to experience this movie. It's such a treat to be able to experience this movie in this kind of, image quality. Obviously, since it was made for TV, it's a 1:3 aspect ratio, which I'm fine with. A lot of people will probably be finding themselves zooming in because, oh, I can't have those bars on the side of this, the image. But as you can see here, the special features are really cool. It's got a new audio commentary with film historian Tim Lucas, which I didn't have time to listen to. I'm not really interested in that. But one thing that was cool is a new interview with the director is still alive, which is really cool. They tracked him down and did a recent interview with the director, and he does some pretty fun, I think it's like a 10-minute recount of, just what he can remember about the production and stuff, which was really fun. Then a new interview with composer Bob Colbert, who did the fantastic theme for the Kolchak, or the fantastic music in this movie. And it's an absolutely, I think it's like 10 minutes long as well, and it's a recent, from this year, I think, interview, which is absolutely fantastic. The guy is nearly 95 years old when they do the interview, and his sense of humor is so freaking fun and so amazing. And if they did this interview this year, hopefully he's turning 95, I think this month. Maybe he did, or maybe it's right around the time he's turning 95, but I hope that that's happening for him. And he's so funny. He's saying something like at the beginning of the interview, like, okay, I'm pushing 95, so if I can't remember anything, it's hard enough for me to stay alive for the interview. Oh my gosh, what a great sense of humor. But this guy does a fantastic job. It gives you an idea of how much simpler and better, making movies and TV movies and, stuff back in the 70s must have been, because he just makes it seem so simple. Like, I seen an image, or I seen a picture of the opening title, or I seen Darren McGavin as Kolchak, and it just the kind of theme just came to my mind. Just dun 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 dun. And he's like, I know it sounds too easy to be true, but I don't know how it is with other composers, but this is what it happened with me. So obviously this guy's probably had a long career of doing music for TV movies, or TV or movies, or I don't know what his career spans or whatever. But the interview was absolutely delightful with this guy. And then it's got the Night Stalker Dan Curtis interview featurette, which I think is something that they shot for the MGM DVD double feature, because it's an older one. I think it's like 20 minutes long or something like that, which is also a great little bit of. Dan Curtis, of course, is the producer of this, and then I think he went on to direct the Night Strangler as well, the sequel to this one. And that's it, actually, although it's not a new interview. I don't know if he's even alive anymore. It's still a good interview, and again, it showcases how much easier and simpler and better it was just through his own, basically his own mouth, his own words, shows how much easier and better it was to get a movie for TV made back then, where you just go to the studio head and say, I've got this idea, and they're like, okay, versus now, or at the time of the interview, he's like, you got to go through 9 different people, and they all say this and that. It's understandable why movies and TV is such crap now, because it's got to go through so many people. It's no wonder why all movies and TV kind of play like exactly the same, because well, all these people have all these guidelines and stuff that make everything just end up being the same. But the special features on here, and then it's a limited edition booklet essay by film critic and author Simon Abrams, and a newly commissioned art by Sean Phillips, which I can only assume this is. And in closing with the review, I do want to say that I'm assuming this is the newly commissioned artwork. I think is absolutely fantastic. Obviously, being a made-for-TV movie, I don't know if there was ever like a poster or any kind of official artwork ever really created for it, but I think this artwork really captures the feeling of the movie and also the era, the early 70s. This artwork is absolutely fantastic, and obviously you've already seen the back in probably a higher resolution image. But that's my review of the frickin' movie The Night Stalker from '72 and the recently released Kino Lorber Blu-ray of it. It's I gotta tell you, you're so familiar with, you're so used to watching, movies now, and you're just so disgusted with them. Seeing a movie like that, really, I mean, I'm reminded when I watch that movie why I watch pretty much only old movies, and we're so grateful that we've got so many old movies from the eras when they were so much better to watch, and we're even more lucky when outfits like this, continue to release these pristine presentations of these classic movies. Like I say, this movie is 70 whatever it is, 74 minutes long, made for TV, and it's so much better than, the stuff that you go to see in the theater now. It's just, and just imagine the fraction of a budget, the money that was spent on this versus the money that's spent on all this summer blockbuster crap you see in the theater. But I'm rambling at this point, so that's my review of the Night Stalker and the fantastically recently released Blu-ray. Thank you very much for watching this review, and as always, we'll catch you on the next one.